green button, or one of the red ones on the side. Good evening, everyone. I am Mayor Todd Archulowski. We have the Director of Land Use behind me, Jeff Green. We're glad you could all be here tonight. Kyle Testerman?
Yes.
This is Kyle Testerman. He's a wildlife biologist with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. This is being recorded on YouTube and Channel 13, so you can go back to the town's YouTube channel at a later date to rewatch it if you missed anything. With that, take it away.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is kind of a different room to be presenting in. I'm glad you've got screens in most directions. I guess the best spot for me with the mic is right up here. So what I'm going to be kind of talking about today, I'm going to be going into a little bit of bear biology. I think a lot of you are probably familiar with some bear biology. You probably had some experiences with bears in the past. Actually, show of hands, who's seen a bear in Connecticut? All right. Who's seen a bear just in their backyard? Or who's seen a bear this year in their backyard? Yesterday. All right. Yeah, in your house, yeah. All right. Let me ask you this then. Who in here has a bear-resistant trash cart? Okay, a couple of them, good handful. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go along too, because those are a really good tool to have. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on biology and natural history. A lot of you might be already familiar with some stuff with bears because they've been around this area for a long time. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I'm also going to talk about how we as the DEP study and manage bears in the state. And then I'm going to spend some time at the end talking about tips for staying safe, tips for coexistence, and then we'll be able to take a lot of your questions. So briefly, some history about bears in Connecticut. They are a native species, so they were here prior to European colonization. They were here for probably about 10-ish thousand years after the glaciers receded and the land became habitable for terrestrial, forest-dwelling mammals. So for about 10-ish thousand years or so until they were extirpated during European colonization in the 1800s due to habitat loss and overexploitation. So black bears are among several mammals that were extirpated in that same time. Gray wolves, mountain lions, fisher, beaver, turkeys, not mammals, but they were also extirpated during that time for those same reasons. When we talk about some of the bears today, and when you kind of talk about bears or hear about bears online, we're going to talk about, we refer to them in kind of their different age classes. So when we talk about bears with cubs, and if you see, a mama bear and their cubs, what does that mean to us as biologists? Really, when we're talking about cubs, we're talking about bears that were born this year, bears that would have been born in probably around mid-January, and we kind of call them cubs for those first several months until they're really getting into the late fall and are going to be denning once again. When they're denning for that first year, so they're turning 1 year old, that's when we start to call them yearlings. And then they'll be yearlings through that next year, and then they kind of get into that sub-adult phase for another couple of years until they become adult bears and are capable of breeding. Adult female bears, you'll often hear those being called sows, and adult male bears, you'll often hear those being called boars. How big do bears get? We get a lot of people estimating how big they think the bear they see in their backyard is, and sometimes they're kind of right on track, and other times they're not. But black bears are born in the den. They're born very small. They're about the size of a soda can. They weigh about a pound or so. They're very helpless, but they grow very fast. They can get, in a couple years, as big as a lawn tractor. We've had 2.5-year-old bears weighing over 250 pounds. So they can get quite big. We've had bears that we've handled that have weighed over 600 pounds. So they can get very, very large. Most bears, though, on average, most male bears are probably between 200 and 400 pounds. Most female bears are between 120 and maybe 250 pounds. But there are obviously bears at both ends. What do bears eat out in the wild? During the springtime, skunk cabbage is an important food source for them, so you'll often see bears spending time in wetlands. But green vegetation throughout the year is an important source of food. So you might look, what are bears eating? They're just eating the grass. They're just eating green leaves. That's a component of their natural diet. Insects, especially as we get into the warmer months, insects and insect larvae are another important component of animal source protein for them. So early in the spring, there's not a lot of insects. They may start digging things out, but definitely as we get into the warmer months, there's a lot more hives that are getting larger, colonial insects that are getting, their colonies are getting larger, and they're more able to exploit those with those claws and their climbing ability. We're getting into the season now where there's a lot more berries out there, so it's blueberry season still right now for us. That's a common one that humans like, that bears also like. But then there's still a large diversity of berry-producing plants out there that bears can still take advantage of even into the winter. And then by far the most important natural food source for bears throughout the whole year really comes mostly in the fall, and that's what we call hard mast. That's predominantly acorns, because we have a lot of oaks in the state, but also beech nuts, hickory nuts, those form hard mast. And those are very calorie and fat rich, and those are great for bears when they're trying to fatten up for that denning period. So that's what bears eat, right? Are they eating other things?
Acorns?
Acorns, yeah.
Well, acorns, is that they prefer white oak over red oak?
I think a lot of mammals prefer white oak because it's less bitter, but they'll still eat red oaks. So what else are bears eating out there? What you guys have probably all seen bears eating.
I noticed in our front yard they're eating apples.
Apples, yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to lump those in with the other fruits out there. So there's cultivated fruits too, and apples now, are one of those cultivated berries, those fruits that they can be eating.
A very small percentage of meat.
Yep, so in that, when I'm talking about the insects too, that's the kind of lumping in with naturally out in the landscape animal protein. So it's a component throughout the year, it's not a big component. But they're eating a lot of human-related foods as well, aren't they, out there? So bird feeders and our leftovers in the garbage. Those are two big components of the bear diet now in Connecticut. How are bears finding all that food, the natural food and the human-related foods? Well, their sense of smell is amazing. Bears, in general, have one of the best sense of smells in the animal kingdom, in the mammal world at least. It's about 100 times better than ours, 10 times better than the best dog. They can smell things from over a mile away. So, they travel miles and miles every day. Think how many sense of things, food sources that they are smelling and locating throughout the day. Where do bears live? A lot of people say, oh, well, the bear's living in my backyard. That's where it lives, or it lives under my deck. Bears do not live in one little place. During the winter, they may den in a location for a period of time, but in general, bears range a long distance, males much further than females, and they range in there to have enough. The size of that range depends on making sure that it has enough of these components of suitable habitat, making sure there's enough food there, making sure there's water, shelter, space, and then the arrangement of all those things. And when you might see bears on the news in places like West Hartford that are much more urbanized than Winchester, you might say, well, how could a bear live in that area? That doesn't look like bear habitat. And that tolerance for different habitats, the different combination of food, shelter, water, space, and arrangement can vary by an individual. Just like there's some of us who couldn't stand if we lived in Manhattan, but there's a lot of people who do find what they need in Manhattan. Others need to live way out in the woods. So what's suitable for a bear, it doesn't need to just be an untouched block of wood. It needs to have the right combination of having enough food, having enough shelter, water source, space, and the arrangement of all those things to become suitable for a bear. And that's going to vary depending on the bear as well. So a couple of things that people often want to know about, and really we're talking about the timing of when bears do things. I'm just going to talk about two major periods of time that people often want to learn more about. One period of time is going on right now, starting in early summer, going into kind of this time and extending into August, is the breeding season. So that's when females who are ready to breed, so they're going into an estrus cycle, and males are going to be following them very often, so people will often see two larger looking bears together moving around. Very often that's when the male is looking for the female. Females will mate every other year unless they lose their litter of cubs during early in the spring. So if the females that just gave birth to cubs this January, those cubs stay alive through this year, they're going to stay with them, they're not going to breed. But next spring, into summer, she's gonna kick those yearlings out at that point. She's not gonna tolerate them around her anymore, and it will become dangerous too, because adult male bears are going to be looking for opportunities to breed with her. So, it's, as I mentioned, one of the very common things we get, especially this time of year, and more so in June and July, earlier in July, are reports of multiple bears together, large bears, but it looks like one bear is injured. And what that is usually the male bear is doing kind of a cowboy walk with their back legs. And so we get a lot of reports that there's a limping bear, there's two bears together, and one's limping around. And those males, they're urinating, they're marking, they're sort of dragging their feet, they're stomp walking, so they have glands in their paws, and they're marking, right, because it's very territorial. They do fight other males, just like they do on the rivers in Alaska with grizzly bears. Male black bears do that same thing in Connecticut for opportunities to breed. So you'll often see male bears kind of walking with their back legs kind of like this on all fours, and people will think that's an injured bear, but really that's just normal male breeding behavior. Something really interesting about bears is they go through, the females go through delayed implantation. So while the eggs are getting fertilized now, if they breed successfully, those eggs, now fertilized eggs, will go through a few divisions and become a blastocyst, and they won't implant in the female's uterine wall yet. So with humans, it implants right away after it goes through enough divisions, and then active pregnancy and gestation begin. For bears and a few other species of mammals, they go through delayed implantation. So that blastocyst or the multiple blastocysts are floating around in the uterus right now, and it's not until the fall when the female has gained enough weight, is healthy, and is ready to actually go through pregnancy, that blastocyst will implant in the uterine wall, usually in November when they begin denning, and that's when a very relatively short active pregnancy begins for about 2 months or so, which is why those cubs are born so small. The next big period of time that we talk about, people often ask us about, is the denning season or hibernation. Bears aren't real true hibernators the way that bats and woodchucks things are, because when bats and woodchucks and other true hibernators go into that period, their body temperature and metabolic rate drop dramatically. Their body temperature will drop almost to the ambient temperature around them. So if a bat is in a cave and the cave is 42 degrees, their body temperature will drop to about 42 degrees. For a bat to rewarm itself back up, it doesn't take a lot of energy to do that because of their body shape and size. Same thing with like a woodchuck or a ground squirrel. But for a bear, if that 300-pound bear let itself go down to 35 degrees, wherever it was denning in a brush pile, think how many calories it would take and how much time it would take for that bear to shiver to warm up. How long does it take your turkey to thaw out in the fridge, right? So it's going to take a long time to re-warm. So bears do what they can to save calories by going into a torpor. So it's kind of a reduced metabolic rate, reduced body temperature, their breathing, their respiration rate drops dramatically, enough to save energy during that period of time during the winter when there isn't a lot of food, but still efficient enough for them to re-warm if they need to and respond to any threats that might come up. Preceding this period of hibernation is what we call hyperphagia. It's the time in the fall when bears are fattening up a ton. They're putting on a lot of weight during that period of time, eating up to 20,000 calories or more a day if they can. So hyperphagia means big eating. So that's coming up in the fall. That's taking advantage of those acorns. I mentioned cubs are born in the den. Most cubs are born, around the second week of January, give or take a week or two here and there. Yearlings den with the mother, usually, but it's not going to be very close, tight-knit like when they're born as cubs. They may be in a den nearby or kind of loosely huddled in a mountain laurel grove at the base of a tree. So bear den types do vary quite a bit too. And I'm going to show a couple of those of it as we go. But one important thing to keep in mind, even though it's winter, you think bears should be hibernating. They can be active at any time, especially if we have mild weather, if there's still food available. The whole reason their bodies are telling them to do this is because should be a lack of food, because it's winter. There should be snow on the ground, the cover should be, the remaining acorns should be covered by snow, or it's just too cold to produce enough food for them to stay active. So they go and den. But as we have warmer winters, and as there's more human-related food available year-round, bears aren't going to need to do that as much. The only bears that really have to den are the pregnant females who need to give a den to give birth and give protection to those cubs. But subadult bears, male bears, if it's warm or if there's a good source of food around, you can expect to see bears year-round, more and more in Connecticut. All right, so that's our background on bears, a little bit of bear biology and natural history. Now I'm going to focus more on how we as biologists in the DEP study and manage bears in the state. And I'm going to start by sharing our mission of our program. The mission of our program, Bear Management Program, is to maintain a healthy, sustainable black bear population in Connecticut using varied management methods to reduce human bear conflicts to a level that is acceptable to the citizens of Connecticut, while still allowing the population to expand into unoccupied, suitable habitat. So, keeping in mind those key points there, a level of conflicts that are acceptable to the public, while allowing bears to expand into unoccupied habitat. So how are we trying to accomplish this mission? We need to collect data to study the bear population. So we can talk about how research is one of our primary tools for gathering that, and then how we can apply what we've learned to our education and to our management. So when we talk about a lot of our bear population, one of the questions we get asked the most is, well, how many bears are there? Are there too many bears? How many bears are there? As if that number is going to give us the only picture we need of the population and how it's behaving around us. And one thing to keep in mind is that Connecticut has some number of bears, right? But we have assuredly a smaller population than states like Maine, which has many thousands of bears. New Hampshire, New York, those have much larger bear populations than we do. We experience far more conflicts though than they do. So, is the number of bears going to be the most informative thing for us to learn about bear conflicts? No. So instead, we get an index to have a better understanding of the population. And in that index are things like population size. That can still be an informative piece of information, a helpful piece of information when we want to know about how the population is doing. We're also going to look at how the range is expanding over time. Is it expanding? Is it stabilizing? We want to learn about reproduction and survival and mortality. So how many of those cubs that were born this year are going to be with their mother next year? How many survived their first year? How many bears are dying from vehicle strikes? What age are bears first reproducing? Is that changing over time? How big is the average litter size, and is that changing over time? And then what can we learn about conflicts, and what are conflicts telling us about the population? What are the causes? What ways can we learn to prevent conflicts or reduce conflicts? So all of those pieces of information we are trying to learn more about to get a better sense of the population, rather than just knowing an informed guess of how big the population is in Connecticut. How we get all that information to build that index out is using a variety of research methods. So non-invasive surveys, we collect public sightings, we do some live trapping, we do radio telemetry, den visits, and we do necropsy, so on dead bears that we collect from the road, most of the time from vehicle strikes. So this is the majority, of the methods, and then how do we use that? This graph is supposed to look kind of confusing and convoluted, but it shows that the methods we're using help us learn more than just one piece of information. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding. Well, what do you collect sightings for? I don't bother reporting sightings anymore. Well, sightings help us learn about the distribution of bears, where they're being seen, where are females with offspring being seen. Helps us learn about their survival. When people report a tagged bear to us, we learn that bear, we know we tagged that bear, and now someone's reporting a re-sighting of that bear. Helps us learn about reproduction. Helps us learn about conflicts. So each one of those methods on the bottom there, I'm going to talk a little bit more about. But the information we get from employing those methods gives us information about each one of those research goals to learn more about the population. Question, who has submitted a bear sighting to us before? Only a few people, and yet all of you raised your hands that you've seen bears. And only a few people have reported those bear sightings to us. So,
Well, it would be like every day you'd have 100 people calling in our area.
yeah,
And that's what you want?
it's helpful.
It's very difficult to get through to you guys, I will say that.
We have an online form. You don't need to talk to us. You can do it from your cell phone. All right? So, public sightings. Our efforts to collect public sightings since when bears first recolonized the state many years ago, we're collecting physical sightings people would call in. Now a lot of it is done online because people do see bears all the time. So we do collect all the general sightings that people want to share with us. From that, we parse out the most informative information for helping us develop that index of the bear population.
It's easy to just Google it, find it.
Yes, if you Google CTD black bear sightings, wildlife sightings, you'll get to. We also collect sightings of bobcats, fisher, moose, gray fox, the other species that we're interested in doing, employing kind of similar things, developing an index. So bear sightings, what does that mean? When somebody sees a bear out in Connecticut, all right, that's what we're collecting. Now, among that, there's a lot of other information on those forms that we are using that is more informative to us than just a general sighting. So, in a bear sighting, someone may notice, did it have tags? Did they see the tags? Did they at least see the color? Or did it have a collar on? Where was it located? was it an adult with offspring? So, female with offspring. Was it dead? All right, so any kind of sighting like that. And then, also on that is the opportunity to report your conflict to us. If you have a human-bear conflict, you can report that. And there's different categories, and it gives you an opportunity to explain what happened, what did you experience. And we go through every one of those sightings. Obviously, not everyone requires a response. General sightings, and a lot of times just general damage to things is not going to elicit a response from us to come do something. Things like home entries, livestock depredations, those are definitely our more serious ones that we try to reach out to right away.
It'd be awesome for also a section for like perfectly peaceful encounter with absolutely no conflict whatsoever.
It's there.
Is it?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep. So, just as an example, okay, of how user-friendly I hope the experience is we collected over 12,000 sightings last year. So 12,000 times, people felt that they saw a bear and wanted to report it to us. So in terms of getting responses from the public, it can be a challenge in different settings to try to engage the public and get responses about what they're experiencing. So our sightings database is very successful in gathering information. And from that, we can parse out the most important pieces that we are going to use in the information like those indices. Now, I know if you may see a bear 5 times a week, and it's just passing through, and do I really have to report all those? No one's requiring you to report anything. But the most helpful sighting reports for us are tagged bears, because once we tag a bear, we handle it, we put 2 ear tags on it, I'm going to talk about that process more. There's no technology in those ear tags, those are just cattle tags. So unless somebody reports it to us, we never know what happens to that bear again. So we learn about tag recovery or resighting of tagged bears through public sightings like this. If a bear's tagged in Winchester, and 2 years from now, we get a sighting report in Simsbury, and later that year we get one in Barkhamsted, we're able to learn more about where that bear ranges and that it's still alive. It's also easier to identify if there was a conflict involved with that tagged bear, that we can sort of identify which bear was involved in that conflict.
So, calling in on one that just transpired, it had double tags in the ears, and the rep at Beat just said, well, what are the numbers on the tag? Like, really, you can get that close to you want me to get that close to the bear?
A lot of people, and I don't want you to go and get close to that bear, but a lot of people, when they take a picture from their yards, all right, people see enough of a tag color, they might see a number, so there's people do see them, a lot of good photographers around, take pictures of the bears too. So We asked that because we wouldn't want to lose that information if somebody did see that.
So color matters, is that like
Yep.
in neighborhoods?
Yeah, color matter, yeah, I'm gonna talk about ear tags a little bit more. So, the next methods, we just talked about our collection of public sightings. The next method I'm gonna go into is our trapping and tracking of bears, and what we learned from that. We try to maintain a cohort of about 30 adult female bears fitted with our radio and GPS collars. They're part of our long-term research. They collect GPS points on a desired schedule, and they transmit a radio signal over a unique frequency. So each collar has a unique frequency. A lot of people then say, well, can you tell me where exactly this bear is? I see this bear every other day, I want to know where it is. Can you tell me where it is? The GPS, I like to think of it this way. GPS is very helpful to know where the bear has been. Right? It stores a lot of all that data on board. We get a snippet of that information sent to us through the networks, but for the most part, all that data is stored on board. The best I can do is see if the collar updated and see where it was in the past week or so. If we want to know where those bears are and how we locate bears when we go to do our winter den surveys, it's using the radio frequency that's unique to it. It sends out a radio beacon, and the closer we are to it and we point our antenna at it, the louder that beep is going to be. And we can dial in the sensitivity of the receivers that we're using and really hone in exactly to where that bear is, all right, to just about be walking up on it. So I'm pointing the antenna at it, and I don't hear any beeps over here, and then I start to hear a louder beep, and then a very loud beep. I can dial it in and only hear it exactly right there. So that's how we locate bears using radio frequencies. From that, we learn about bears and their habitat use. So we use that telemetry data, that remote sense telemetry data on those collared sows to help us identify the preferred habitat of our reproducing population. Then we can take that information, where females like to go in the landscape, and model that elsewhere throughout the state to see, is there more of that habitat that females like to use outside of the range of bears. I mentioned using telemetry to find the females when we do our winter den surveys. So we use that radio telemetry, find where the female is denning, sedate her. During that period of time, we assess her body condition, we put a new collar on, we look for cubs, so that's where we learn about litter size. So among that 30 or so cohort of adult female bears, that's where we're getting a lot of our information about litter size and cub survival. So we're going to learn about how many cubs this female has this year. Next year, when we go back to that, we're going to try to go back to the den again. We may not sedate her because we don't, those collars will last at least 2 years. But we're going to try to go to the den and see how many of those cubs are with her now in that first year, at the end of that first year. That's how we get cub survival, first year survival. We learn about the den types, what types of structures and things are bears denning in. A lot of people think it's going to be in a cave. All right, there is a good amount of rocky areas around here, but bears very often are denning in brush piles, natural slash piles, down trees, at the base of trees in a mountain laurel grove like this one pictured here. Occasionally do find some rocky crevices to go in. More and more though, we are finding bears denning under human-related structures as well. So denning under porches and decks and things like that. When we handle the cubs, we get some samples from them as well as the females. Take a hair sample, we do some measurements, but we also give them a pit tag. So a passive integrated transponder, similar to, it's the same thing as the microchip that you put in your pet. So that gets injected in the nape of the neck, and then they don't get ear tags when they're cubs. If we handle them in the following months, they can get ear tags. So yearlings often get ear tags if we handle them. But otherwise, cubs will just get that pit tag. Every bear we handle gets a pit tag. So cubs and adults, first time we handle them, we put a pit tag in it. Pit tags are another way to help us identify that unique individual. If we recover a vehicle-killed bear, we can scan it and see if we've handled this bear before. We learn more about that bear's, now we have a window into how long it lived for. So, ear tags are another thing I know was already kind of brought up, and how do we identify that? We change the color of the ear tag each year. So it kind of aids us a little bit in identifying, because over time, the writing on those tags will fade if it's been 10 years between handling that bear, seeing that bear. So the color changes over time, but the ID is unique to each bear as well. So this bear's tags are 139. This bear was the 13th bear tagged in 2019. Right, so that's how when we were doing tags in the past, that's how they were doing it. What do you think happens after 10 years? If we're doing one digit, right? We do get some repeats. So last year we changed the system up a little bit, where we did A, and then 01 was the first bear last year. This year we're doing B. So our first bear was B01. All right. So now we won't have a repeat for 26 years, unless we screw something up. So every bear we handle that's not a young cub gets 2 ear tags. All right. Whether we handle it for research, whether we caught it as the non-target bear at a conflict site, or whether it was a bear that we assume was the conflict bear that we captured. Any bear we handle gets ear tag, tag in both ears. If you see a bear with one ear tag, it just means the other one fell out. They wear out. As they're going through the brush, they rip and they can pop out. So it's not a strike system. If you see a bear with one ear tag, it's not been caught as a problem once, and 2 ear tags, it's caught a problem twice. Every bear we handle gets 2 ear tags.
It doesn't necessarily have to do with conflicts.
No. Nope. All right, so the next method we'll kind of talk about are the necropsies. And we learn a lot of information from the necropsies that we do. We talk about necropsies, that's our wildlife autopsies that we do. We try to collect every vehicle-killed bear throughout the state. So we get notifications about that. We also try to do that for bobcats and fisher. So if you ever see a dead bobcat or fisher or gray fox, you can put in a sighting report and let us know, and we'll try to go out and collect it. So we try to gather every carcass that we can. We assess its body condition by looking at the intestinal fat. We take a tooth out and send it to a lab for aging. We take a number of different tissue samples, internal and external, and save those and use those for other research about disease surveillance in the bear population. I mentioned scanning it for the pit tag. We look at their stomach contents. So we do a lot of these necropsies. We get 60 to 70 bears every year, 60 to 70 bobcats or so every year, and only a few fisher and a few gray fox. But from that, what do we learn? One notable finding is about half of the bear stomachs that we look at have some type of human-related food in them. Trash, bird feed, things like that. All right, so this is a stomach contents of a typical bear stomach without any trash. This is all green vegetation, ants and ant larvae in them. So I've mentioned a little of what we learned here and there, but now we're going to focus more on how we put all that research together and what is our population, what are we learning from that index. So what we've learned, bears began to recolonize Northwest Connecticut in the 1980s. They were been reported in many towns in that period of time, but it wasn't until we started to see females with offspring that we knew we had a reproducing population in the state. So when there's females with offspring, they don't travel very far when they have young offspring in the year, so they were probably born in that area. So it became clear that there was a reproducing population in the state, not just a few one-offs, by the 1990s. So at this point, 30 years, over 30 years now, bears have been established in Connecticut. It's not a new phenomenon, especially in this part of the state. Our map here is just showing you the sighting reports, and even back into the early 2000s, where you can kind of get a sense of where our reproducing population is being seen more frequently.
What are those two in the dark red?
That's Kin and Simsbury at that point in time. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that there's 26 adult female bears there, 26 to 50. That's just, again, public sightings, the number of sightings that we're getting. So really we're learning more about the distribution of the reproducing populations, being reported in more towns and clustering in that northwest corner of the state. We got, back then, there were still you know, a few sporadic reports of females with offspring in other parts of the state, but you can kind of see a pattern here that it's that northwest corner that's where the established population is showing up. Fast forwarding to last year, this is sightings of bears, and bears are being seen in every town in the state over the last few years. Every town in the state has bears in it at one point, you know, or another in the year. So some might be passing through, and some might be, you know, established in their home range. So this is just bear sightings. And again, as I mentioned before with sightings, the interpretation is not that there's the most bears in the Farmington Valley where you've got the darkest colors, and few bears in Canaan, in that top left corner next to Salisbury. That's just sighting reports. We know there's established bears in that area. We're not using sightings to tell us the number of bears in that area. Good question?
Where did they wander into Connecticut from?
They reestablished from remnant populations in the Berkshires. So over time, they were not extirpated in western Massachusetts. There was a remnant population that over many decades started to expand further south in western Massachusetts until it started to come across the border. There are also, you know, other parts of Massachusetts as well, because the bear population has expanded east in Massachusetts. So bear sightings were also starting to show up also in the northeast corner border towns as well. All right. So we've had continued population growth of the bear population, especially in particular the reproducing or the established population. So the last graph had bears everywhere. This graph has bears on the western part of the state. Why is the difference? This is where we have our established breeding population, where we get many reports year after year of females with offspring being reported. And we get one-offs and little pockets, clusters here and there in eastern Connecticut, but our established, well-established population is just in western Connecticut, and that is expanding further south as we go. So in the early pre-2000s, it was that northwest border towns, and it slowly expanded over time. We get few reports, you know, as I mentioned, in the east, and for the most part now, this established area that you see colored here in the chart is about 80 towns in the state. That light blue area where we're seeing ongoing expansion of the breeding population, there's about 1 million Connecticut residents living in just that strip alone. The rest of above, green, yellow, and above, there's also about 1 million people. So in that expanding population of bears right now, they're interacting with 1 million more people that are relatively new to dealing with bears. So we expect, you know, our reported conflicts to increase quite a bit in those areas.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Now, like, let's say I call you and I say I saw a bear, and down the street, the bear goes to her house, and she calls. So, do they know that it might be the same bear, or do you?
Yeah, but in those cases, those general sightings, those don't inform us, they don't necessarily give us any new information. So mentioned the key pieces of that information are the distribution of changes in year to year, whether there's a conflict involved. Your neighbor may have had a conflict, maybe you didn't have a conflict, maybe your neighbor did. Maybe the neighbor saw the tags, maybe you didn't see the tags. So it's always helpful. It doesn't mean that we're double counting, triple counting, because we're not counting bears using sightings.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yep.
So the way they're reproducing in this area, where do you feel we're gonna be in 2 to 3 years down the road? Are the numbers gonna just keep going up? in
I
this
would
area?
expect the numbers to continue to go up, yep, because I'm gonna talk a little bit, I'll answer that as we kind of go along too. And if I don't answer it well enough, you can follow up with me.
Do you have an estimation of how many bears actually live in Connecticut?
What was
Close.
the question I had mentioned earlier, right? So our guesses are 1,000, 1,200 or so,
1,012.
right?
Well, Connecticut is 5,000 square miles roughly.
Uh-huh.
What would be an unacceptable population of bears in our state? A million?
It's not,
a million?
it isn't necessarily about the population size, because the other information about the population is what's more informative in terms of how we would manage the population as well. If I had 100 bears and 10,000 conflicts, 100 bears would be too much. If I had 10,000 bears and no conflicts, then nobody's having an issue with that. So I wouldn't need to manage the population in in a way to reduce it down. It depends on how the population is behaving, which is why I spend so much time talking about how it's not about that number, it's about the other pieces of that index that are more informative to how we would manage the population. All right, so what is driving that growth and that expansion? Right, the main reason we're seeing that driving it is regrowth of suitable natural habitat. The majority of Connecticut is still unoccupied by the reproducing bear population. So on that last map, mostly in western Connecticut, but here on this map, a lot of this map is green, and that is suitable habitat for bears. We learned that from the collar data from the female bears, the habitat they preferred. So females are also, they're selecting for some of these exurban or sort of like developed but still forested areas because there's a lot of suitable natural habitat and the bump in from human-related foods as well. For females to want to be comfortable being around humans, right, they have to have some behavioral changes over time as well. Those things you may hear us read on our website are habituation, human habituation. Have you ever heard of bears being habituated? Heard of that term? Okay, so that's really bears being more desensitized to human presence. 30 years ago, a bear would have been much more afraid of people than it is today. I think many of you have probably experienced that. You used to yell at a bear, it ran off. Now, it doesn't really care at all. So that's the habituation part. So bears aren't as fearful of being around people, and then they're finding better food rewards around people's homes as well. Not humans necessarily in general, but our human developments as well. They're finding more trash, bird feeders, and things that make coming around more rewarding. They're not as afraid, so the level of human activity is more tolerable, just very low risk, and the rewards are much greater. Think about it, if 1 out of every 20 houses has a bird feeder on their porch, and there's no consequence for that bear coming on that porch, it's going to try to check just about every porch it goes on because it pays off 1 out of every 20 times. And there's a great food reward and there's no consequence. And now that bear is learning, I'm just going to check every front porch because there's sometimes a reward there.
And then
right?
somebody freaks out and then they report it and then they want to shoot them.
Well, so that is the concept of getting conditioned, food conditioned, right? So whether it be a bird feeder on the front porch or your trash can that's sometimes kept in the garage, sometimes the garage is open, sometimes maybe you have a refrigerator in your garage and you left it open one time and now the bear knows. Sometimes these garages have fridges that are full of food. So I'm going to try to, I'm going to walk in every open garage I see because it's paid off before and there was no consequence. There was no risk before, right? So nothing bad happened. I'm so used to people, they just go inside, they leave me alone, and I get the food rewards. So that's that conditioning, that food conditioning, and that habituation coming together and leading to bears coming into these more developed areas. And you can imagine all those human-related foods are highly caloric. They give the females kind of a boost in productivity as well from all that human-related food. One concept that maybe you touched upon, you were kind of asking about, and I'm going to try to hit it a little bit more too throughout, is the idea of biological carrying capacity versus cultural carrying capacity. Biological carrying capacity is the maximum number of individuals that could persist on the landscape, assuming the environment isn't changing at all, could be on the landscape indefinitely. Biological carrying capacity. The cultural carrying capacity, which kind of relates a little bit more to what our mission is with gauging human-bear conflicts to a level that's acceptable to the public, is the maximum number of individuals that the human population will tolerate. You can imagine, though, that these are not static numbers. Biological carrying capacity could change as bears become more habituated in food condition. There's more resources to exploit in new areas. It may also decrease if natural habitat decreases or gets removed enough that there's less suitable habitat for them. So the biological carrying capacity could go down for that reason. And the cultural carrying capacity will also change quite a bit. As the public deals with more and more human-bear conflicts, their viewpoints of bears will change over time as well and go from being something that's a valued natural resource to being viewed as a pest because of more issues, things like that. Right? If somebody were to be killed by a bear, public may have overall start to view bears very differently. So that cultural carrying capacity and the biological carrying capacity can change over time. Our reproductive changes, I mentioned those on the other slide too. Some of the things we're learning from our data is that females are reproducing at a younger age than in some other parts of the black bear range throughout North America. So females, as they're getting enough food and calories and they're growing, they're maturing sooner. They're reaching a weight and kind of a good health status that they then can breed, sometimes after that second winter. And so then they're giving birth at 3 years old in the den. So we've had many 3-year-old bears giving birth to their first litter. And so that, in other parts of black bear range, especially more wild areas, it can take 4-5 years for a female to have their first litter. And in Connecticut, we're seeing it in some cases, sometimes still may take 4 or 5 years, but more and more we're seeing bears reproducing at this younger age. Litter size is also increasing over time. All right, so our average litter size from the early 2000s was a little over 2, 2.1, 2.2, creeping up. So think about it then. For every 10 of our reproducing females that are having cubs that year, there'd be on average 22 new cubs. 8 years later, so the next 8-year period, that average is up to 2.6. So for every 10 of our research bears that we're tracking, there were 26 new cubs. And then our cub survival is quite high as well. Our long-term average is about 75%. We have years, those do change those can change, but they all kind of are around trending up. We've had some years where, again, among our 30 bears in our cohort, their offspring, some years where it's been 96% survival, high 80s survival, all right, but the long-term average is 75%. So the population is likely growing faster now than it was even in the first couple decades of recolonization in the state.
What's a typical natural lifespan for a bear?
There's been black bears recorded living late into their 20s. Yep, so if they don't get hit by a vehicle or die from their mortality, they're capable of living into their 20s, even into their 30s. Quick question?
Quick question about population again.
Yep.
My understanding is that the last population study was actually done back in 2014 by the University of Connecticut in coordinating with DEEP. Why is it that DEEP is not finding out what the population is by doing a hair study that they did last time?
Yeah, so those studies, you doing a hair snare study, are very time and labor and intensive and very expensive. So they can cost $500,000 to do. It can take multiple years to collect the data and have all those genetics analyzed. So it's very laborious. So it's not something states do year after year after year. Most states get information about their population size using population reconstruction from harvest data. We don't have a harvest, so we don't do it that way. We are currently doing a study collaborating with Mississippi State University. They're kind of the gold standard for that type of hair corral study where maybe, and we have a couple sites, they have a couple sites in Winchester, actually, so they have 300 sites throughout western Connecticut. They've got set up with trees that are about 10-15 foot square, and then there's some barbed wire set down low and a scent lure inside. So bears walking through, get a little hair snagged on it. Those get analyzed at a lab. Mississippi State is doing that. And then we're going to get a lot more information about bear population and then density. So there's a lot of new models too that have come out since that study that UConn did over a decade ago. So we're going to get a lot of good information coming up. We'll know those results in another year or so. But in that same regard, it's been a year in the planning, a year to execute, a year to analyze. So already that data very quickly becomes sort of outdated a little bit too. So it's not something we've got to lean all of our management on a number still. We still need to factor in all these other components. But it's going to be good to have some new information on that.
What did this guy do on the table to get to that state?
Crossed a road he shouldn't have. Yep. All right, so I spent a lot of time talking about these behavioral changes, but one of the things that maybe you all have noticed too, if you see a certain tag bear, you've been seeing the same tag bear over periods of time, is that this behavior becomes progressive. As the rewards get better, they're getting more desensitized to human activity, it's not just happening generation to generation, which is true, it's also happening with individuals that are 10, 20 years old, that they know how to get around, they know how to get what they need, and, you know, so you're seeing that behavior become a little bit more, that progressive behavior where I get my food, I get my garbage cans, I see those open windows, I smell the garbage inside, I'm very comfortable being around homes, I circle every house, I look for the food, the door is open this time, let's see if I can get that inside, doesn't smell like people are in. So that's that kind of progressive behavior. So what have we learned from our sighting reports? When people report conflicts, you know, in their sighting reports to us, we can see that there is a long-term trend, not just in the number of conflicts being reported to us, which you'd expect with a growing bear population, and as we've tried to make sighting, you know, reporting sightings, that, you know, people know that you don't have to call us. It's going to be a lot faster and easier just to submit it online, because you may get an answering machine. You know, people call it the general line. Online sightings are much easier for people to let us know about. But so not only are we seeing the number of conflicts increase, but they're occurring in more and more places. So that's where we're learning about conflicts are occurring in more places as the range is expanding. We get conflicts reported in over 140, 150 towns last year. Right, so for the last several years, again, those trend lines show long-term increases. The majority of those conflicts, I've thrown that word around, bear conflicts, human bear conflicts, a lot of those are preventable, what people would call nuisance. It's not really a word we like to use, but they're preventable behaviors that those lead bears down, you know, can lead bears to more conflicts. The majority of the human bear conflicts that get reported to us involve trash and bird feeders. Over the last 5 or 6 years, that slice of bird feeders has shrunk. It used to be a third trash, a third bird feeders, and a third everything else. But that sliver, or I should say, that slice of bird feeders is decreasing. Whether that's through education or people knowing that they shouldn't be reporting. I shouldn't have a bird feeder up, and so I'm not going to report that. Here I got it. That's hard for us to parse that out. But people are still reporting that bears are getting to their bird feeders throughout the year. So while those, you know, have remained, those two have remained about 2/3 of all the human bear conflicts reported to us. The slivers for livestock depredations, home entries, and structural damage have increased. Structural damage has increased a lot. And that includes things like bears ripping screens off, trying to get into a house, bears pulling lattice off of lattice and getting underneath decks, ripping open shed doors, barn doors, any sort of structural damage. So the cost of those can sometimes be small, but it can also be thousands of dollars of damage for structural. Bears breaking down your overhead garage door. How much of a fix is that? That's a big fix. All right, and that is a daily occurrence. These more serious conflicts, one of the ones that we often talk about because it's a truly unique outlier in Connecticut, is the bears entering the living spaces of homes. This year we've had over 40 already, which is more than last year. I don't fixate too much on 1 year total versus the other. I'm looking at that trend line. We are having, it's an increasing trend of bears entering homes. And you say entering homes, I don't mean getting into your 3-season room, your porch. This is the living space of the house, all right? So bears, sometimes it's breaking in, sometimes it's pushing through a screen, which is still using force. Occasionally it's something, the door's left open, but it's bears getting into that living space. And 10 years ago, it was a much more rare occurrence, partly because bears were less habituated, less food conditioned than they were today. So 10 years ago, all right, it was around 10, all right? If we could go back to 10 right now, that would be amazing, all right? But we've had years in the 60s, so even a down year, like 40 last year, is a ton of home entries, all right? So that's...
Would you guys accept me shooting a bear in my kitchen and killing him?
Legally, you can shoot a bear that's in your home,
Okay.
in the living space of your home.
In the living space?
Yes.
In the kitchen and I took him out?
Yes.
Who's gonna take it out of it?
Well, I assume you don't want to, but you can call us,
No,
call
I'm
the
not
emergency.
looking forward to doing that.
Yeah, but you absolutely have the right to do that.
Okay.
Yep.
Paintball gun or something.
Well, yeah, so if a bear's in your house, safest thing to do is go into another room, call 911, have police and con come. All right, the bear may be gone by then, we can intervene. I'm just telling you, the safest thing is
That's
to
not the best thing to do, because the bear's gonna leave thinking, oh, no consequences, I can go back into the house anytime I
Well,
want.
if you don't tell us. But if you tell us, we will we will make an attempt to follow up and help you with setting a trap, electric unwelcome mat. But if you don't tell us,
Okay, no, I've seen on television news where you guys have put a trailer or something to try to trap
Trap
a bear
'em.
that was
That's
going in.
one of-
And
that's one of our
a-
tools.
I see that as a better way to go.
Yeah.
But being an excitable person,
Yeah.
I'm only gonna take them out.
yeah, I'm telling you legally, you can do that, all right?
Can I ask, so how much is that I can't say the word, is that terrible? Then being-
Habituation,
no, where they are going in because of trash or bird feeders, whatever, versus increase in population. That they're doing it more, that they're going into houses, I'm sorry, more because of the
Yeah.
population, or?
it's a combination. Population is increasing and it's expanding into more places, and the population is getting more habituated in food conditions. So it's both pieces, right? So we're seeing those home entries occurring in more places as well, right? Good segue. All right, so home entries are not occurring in just a couple towns that, oh, okay, those people, they whatever, they don't do anything with their bears, all right? They always have those problems, they just do that. We've had, in the last 6 years, 308 home entries in Connecticut in 39 different towns. So this isn't just one bad bear, okay, go get rid of that bear and then it's gonna solve all the problems, all right? This is a problem in more towns all across western Connecticut in particular, where we have most of our bears, all right? And this isn't including the many attempted home entries where bears try to get into a house and, because it was secured and damage was caused, where a bear was trying to get in, coming in through a screen window and was scared away before it entered the house. It doesn't include entry into secondary structures, getting into a three-season room, screened-in porch, breaking into garages, all these other things that in other states where they have a little bit more liberal definitions of some of these home entries where they would kind of count those, we don't. So this doesn't include the many things that also cause structural damage and are very costly to residents. Inside homes, there's also, in porches and all these things, there's also great potential for pets to get in altercations with bears and for people to get in altercations with bears. And we have had more, and also an increasing trend in the number of bear attacks or human bear contacts where bears are making contact, scratching and biting humans, and that trend has been trending up as well over the last decade.
Excuse me, why is there a differentiation between three-season rooms where I pay taxes on and it's somewhat climatized versus living space? I have my coffee in my three-season room every morning, I have heater in the winter, the town charges me taxes on that room. Why, you differentiated a couple
Yeah.
times, and when Deep was at my house, to that gentleman's question, as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you can't shoot a bear in a three-season or a non-living space, although I consider that my living space, but I can. Could you just help me understand the differentiation as to
Yeah.
three-season versus
And
living?
when it comes to, so in Clearly in the Kitchen, that, that is something that, I don't have to, I'm not gonna interpret necessarily all the laws, because some of those are more law enforcement. If you were to shoot a bear and maybe you felt like your life, bear was about to inflict great bodily harm to you, those are things that are not, I'm not gonna be involved in, that's a law enforcement thing.
No, but you yourself have
Yeah.
differentiated the term living
Yes,
space
I'm
versus
gonna follow
three-season.
that up. I was just kind of clarifying why one, your interpretation may be different, and what it says in the statute is what it says. It's not my job to interpret
No,
that
no, I
statute.
just wanted to
So,
understand.
why do we as bear managers differentiate between a screened-in porch, three-season room, or, maybe a crawl space, or the garage,
I don't have coffee
right?
in my
All
crawl
those, right, so but people, those are all different considerations. Because it still is a very different space than for a bear. So there's a lot less human scent out there, it's open to the air. So a screen, preventing, if it's a screened-in area, is different than what is inside the living space of the house. That has a lot of human scent, it's very lived in. So our long-standing interpretation of that is that it's a different space to the bear, and a bear entering that, going into a screened-in porch, that behavior is different than a bear going into the living space of the home. And the potential for that progressive behavior is also different. Paul?
I believe that some states would classify a bear in a breezeway as a home entry. But
Yep.
if you think about it, a bear, it's no effort on the bear's part to walk into a breezeway. It's more effort to break into a home, to go through a window, open a home door into the living area. Much more effort in that regard.
Yeah.
And it is true, the living area is just gotta be loaded with human scent compared to a breezeway, for example.
Yeah, and so, that's, as managers, that's our interpretation. If we were to expand that definition, at this point, certainly the numbers would increase a lot more, so we keep that interpretation pretty tight, for how we are comparing year to year and gauging what that bear's behavior is sort of a level to that risk. So I get it. A bear coming into the spaces that you want to feel safe in isn't good. No, it's not saying that behavior is excusable for that bear, but it's a different level of, as we interpret it, as we perceive it, and as we consider it. But, yeah.
You say you had 300, the last day that was stat was like 308 break-ins since 2020.
Home entries,
something like that. That was the bear break-ins.
Yeah.
You know how many human break-ins there were at that time?
I imagine,
Humans that broke into houses?
I imagine a lot more. Yeah.
Last year alone, 4,300.
Yeah.
So you're more likely to encounter a human breaking into your house than a
Yep. But that's not what we're here for tonight.
No,
I'm not talking about human
Have
break.
to go there to get them to these.
So, quick question. I want to keep rolling.
Is there
We'll
something,
be here all night.
it's something in the middle, like a bear horn, bear spray, that works?
Yeah, the last couple slides are going to be about coexistence stuff. So let's if we can hold some questions, we get a little further along. So comparing our home entries, I mentioned that compared to other states. All right, so the number of home entries that we have in Connecticut year to year is much greater relative to our estimated bear population sizes compared to other states. All right, so even just based, not even as a scaled, if we were not to scale it to the estimated population sizes, our numbers would still be much higher. But we know our population is much smaller than it is in New York, right? Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, where they have a much larger area full of bears and much larger bear populations. All right, so we have a lot of home entries overall and relative to these other states. New Hampshire last year with their 5,800 bears, so had 6 home entries, right? So if there was one pocket of New Hampshire that had around 1,000, 1,500 bears, or something like we have, and in that pocket they had 40 home entries, and the rest of the state with 5,000 other bears had 6, they would say, well, what is going on in this zone? We need to do to manage bears better in that zone, all right? So this site here is becoming much more common in Connecticut for residents, and it shouldn't be. This should be alarming.
Yes. And this is because we don't lock our doors, we like the great outdoor air coming in.
Not just because bears are breaking in. They're breaking through windows, they're opening doors, right? And there's a lot of people in Connecticut who don't have air conditioning and live in one-story houses. And so in the summers, they're supposed to seal up their house tight just because they're afraid bears are gonna get into their house, right? So that's kind of yes, if you don't want a bear in your house, close the windows, lock the door. That's the advice we have to give people if you don't want bears. But I understand, it's ridiculous that on these nice days, you can't have windows open if you don't, there's a chance you're gonna have a bear come in through your window.
Is it true they push in the window air conditioners?
Yes.
That is true.
Yes, that happens. Happens several times a year. That, as reported to us, I'm sure it happens more, but just as reported to us. All right. Quickly, yep.
If there was less garbage around, people left less garbage, or they took down their theater or whatever they did, then maybe the bears would have come there to the house because there's nothing?
If there were less attractants around, it would take time, right? Because bears still are so accustomed to knowing that, yes, that reward, even if that reward is going to be less frequently, right? But that also requires 100% compliance from everybody, which is very difficult to reach. We're gonna just keep some of that more for our coexistence stuff at the end. Specifically in Winchester, here's some information for you. All right, sightings have been reported since the early 90s. In the last couple of years, over 900 sightings have been reported. 250 of those were females with offspring. We've had over 300 human-bear conflicts reported to us in Winchester. Half of those were trash. The last numbers I got from USA Hauling last year was there's about 350 customers that have the bear-resistant trash cans. I know a few of you are here tonight. All right, those are very effective at keeping bears out of trash. They cost 10 to 12 bucks a month. It depends on the agreements with them. All right, but those can be stored outside the garage. They are highly effective.
How come the recycling bins aren't there?
Because bears very less often get into recycling bins because you're required to rinse those recyclables out. The food, the calorie rewards, are in the green bins. All right, they're in the trash cans, right? And bears can smell that. So if you were to leave food in your recycling, bears would tip over your recycling. It's because the food reward is here, they can smell that it's coming from that bin and not that bin. All right, so what, over time, sightings have been increasing this year. We had 10 home entries just in Winchester. All right, bears getting in 10. Yep. Yep, especially around the lake area, a lot of home entries. All right, so, but overall, we're still seeing that increasing trend of sightings being reported in town. So what's the future hold for us? All right, so getting into preventing conflicts. All right, removing those attractants, securing your garbage, not putting bird feeders out, not leaving pet food out, cleaning your grills, those things can all help, all right, are all things that reduce the amount of calorie rewards around our homes. And if there isn't a reward around our homes, they're less likely to want to come there. Or it's going to take time for them to realize that every McDonald's they go to is out of food, right? Because that's what they're used to, just rolling up, and every couple of houses has something worthwhile in it. We urge you to remove your bird feeders altogether, right? That includes hummingbird feeders. That includes thistle, nitrous feed, hot pepper seed. Those are still calories for bears, and we know they still are attracted to it and still get it. If that bird feeder is out of reach, it's way up here, maybe the bear's not going to get a food reward, but it's still going to come, and it's going to be attracted because it smells it. Birds are also messy eaters, so they're throwing seeds everywhere, right? So there's going to be seed on the ground. So even if it's out of reach, it's on a concrete pole, bear's never going to push that down, it's still going to attract bears to the house and to the neighborhood. All right, I mentioned the bear-resistant trash cans, very effective. All right, if you have a commercial property, bear-resistant dumpsters are also available from the major haulers around as well. All right, so having the wrong product, essentially having the wrong dumpster. All right, the right products are out there, you just need to get them. All right, because the next thing you'll start to get bears coming into all the dumpsters. There already are. You can treat your trash with, ammonia. You can spray the lid. You can soap rags tied on. You can put some ammonia in your trash bags to mask the scent of the smell. All right, but those are just kind of things you can do, but they aren't as effective as getting a bear-resistant trash can and excluding bears from the trash altogether. A bear-resistant cart or dumpster does no good if it's not used properly though, so making sure that the locks are maintained on those carts because they get jammed up, not overfilling them. If you have a bear-resistant dumpster, making sure it's locked and secured properly or your tenants are using it properly. So that's kind of the trash part, preventing access. It is illegal to intentionally feed bears in Connecticut as of 3 years ago. All right, so it's illegal to place any sort of food or attractant out like that, food-based attractant out, that might attract dangerous wildlife, including bears. All right, so what does intentionally mean? That's kind of an issue with how the law was written, where it didn't specify unintentional, but the limited powers that our agency has for enforcing it is generally if you have bird feeders out and bears are being attracted to it, to give you a warning that, okay, this is attracting bears. If you continue to do that, it's going to be an intent that you're showing your intent to continue to do that. And that's when it can become illegal. You can get another warning and then a fine, right? So it's difficult, especially with the very limited number of people who can enforce the state law, that state law in Connecticut. It's very difficult to have that state law be the only effective thing in place as a consequence for that. So that's kind of where municipal ordinances can still have a good role in a town. There's about a dozen towns that have ordinances. These can be tailored more towards the needs of the town, like limiting times of year where any bird feeder is outside the ordinance, against the ordinance. They can be more specific towards trash and things like that. So municipal ordinances still have an important part, because they can assess certain fines, and then there's a lot more people to enforce that ordinance in a municipality versus depending on one of the state NCON officers to pay you a visit. So, even though we have a state law against feeding bears, municipal ordinances can still be a very good tool for towns to employ. There's a number of towns that have them already. You can look at how the wording and discuss with them how those things have gone. But the big hurdle is community compliance. Because if one person still has their bird feeders out, the whole neighborhood's going to be affected. The analogy that I like to point out, why this is such a difficult issue, is because we need COVID vaccine level compliance across everybody. And we could barely get 85% of the people in Connecticut to stick their arm out the window when it was free and just drive through. We are expecting people to be compliant every day, and it's going to cost them money to do so. So expecting to reach enough compliance, and that's the only way we're going to, expecting our conflict numbers to decrease while only relying on compliance in the neighborhood is not going to be successful. And that's the way we've been pushed into managing these issues, right? Managing compliance. If you want to not have bears be an issue in your area, you can do those things and you will have a reduction in the conflicts. But your neighbors may not, and you may be impacted by that. So community compliance is very important, but keep in mind what that actually would require. It would require an impossible level of compliance to be reached for things to actually change, relying on compliance-based management alone.
Those non-compliant neighbors are the real problem.
That's the truth. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we all have it.
It's not the bears, the humans that are not listening to you guys and what we should be doing, what we should not be doing.
Yeah.
I think wide-
But it's not
widespread
just
education
compliance,
could
it's not
help.
necessarily, what we're paying for is decades of past non-compliance that has shaped our bear population.
Yeah.
Which means it isn't going to be fixed immediately with full compliance or with other things. There's not an immediate
Yeah, it's not gonna flip the
fix.
switch
right?
off.
So, a couple other things, is it quick, Annie? I know-
Real quick.
Okay.
How many warnings has DEEP issued and how many citations? And do you have any idea how many municipal, like, what's the level of enforcement of those good, like, bird feeder bans?
I don't know. I know it. The state law has been enforced in different ways. I know some people have been fined. I don't have those numbers. I know you can, it's how you can seek those out.
If you're a bird person,
Pardon?
how if you're a bird person and you love to see birds coming in?
I'm a bird person. I love seeing birds, but I plant native plants, which is actually helpful for the birds. Right? Bird feeders feed a limited number of seed-eating birds or suet-eating birds or nectar-eating birds. But what are birds really trying to feed their young this time of year? They can't feed seeds to a nestling. They feed insects. Insects are supported by native plants. One oak tree can support 300 different species of insect larvae, of butterfly and moth larvae, and caterpillars, right? And that is what every bird, just about every bird, is feeding their young. So you'll have a much better impact, if you really care about birds, a better impact by planting a native plant garden than putting out a bird feeder. Water features are also excellent for attracting more birds than just the couple seed eaters that you're going to attract.
And don't have the tick guys come and spray your
Right.
yard, because that kills a lot of bumblebees.
Yep. All right, so anybody here have beehives, chickens, livestock? One, okay, that's not more. All right. One of the things that is, yeah. Have you ever had a conflict with a bear at one of those?
Everything's locked up at night, everything's secured.
Yeah,
We have electric fences, everybody else gets them, not us.
yeah. But you have electric fence? Or you
We've
don't?
had electric.
Yeah. So electric fencing is the most effective, the most cost-efficient way to exclude bears from beehives, livestock, chickens, orchards, small agricultural areas. It's far more cost-friendly than people think. It's a lot easier to set up than people think as well. All right, but it's got to be properly set up and maintained, because we have talked to many people who just go out and they run to Tractor Supply, they get a bunch of stuff, they get the wrong stuff, they set something up that's still ineffective for how bears are actually going to interact with it. So getting the right information is really important. We have some of our electric fence information. We have a lot of it online as well. Bearwise has a lot of good information, so if you know anybody who's having any issues, I know there's nobody raise their hands here, but let them know that, you know, electric fencing is highly effective at keeping bears out of those things, all right, and that there's a lot of resources.
Just
We
real
run,
quick on that, I have a photo where a bear was chasing me, got behind my fence, my dogs were at the end, they're face to face. The bear stopped at the fence, stuck its tongue out, I have a picture of it, to touch the wire to see if it was electrified.
yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, one of the things that makes electric fencing very effective too, because if you have an electric fence, say you have beehives, right, you want every bear around to know that that fence is there and that it's hot. So baiting the wires actually with some peanut butter with foil is a great way to teach those bears that it's there, and they'll be compliant and they will leave it alone. Baiting is very effective. In your sense of touching it with the tongue, it's a very sensitive area. All right, so we run some workshops every year on setting up electric fence. We go through a lot more information about electric fencing for bears. We set up a couple fences. So we have a lot of resources available for people. So those barriers of, oh, it's too expensive, oh, it's too complicated, I need an electrician to come, you don't need that, right? So you can reach out to us and we can help you.
What about around the screen porches? Is that dangerous for people or?
No, electric fences, when set up properly, are not dangerous for people and pets. We all will, you'll get zapped eventually, you'll touch it and shoot. No, it hurts, but it's not harmful when it's set up properly. Electric fences send a pulse of electricity down the conductor, depending on the model, right? And that's how, for some of the stuff around homes that we've set up, we've used electric unwelcome mats. Which are, you know, we've made some, but you can buy them commercially. The rubber mats with a conductor, you know, hardware cloth on it, things like that. And so when a bear steps on it, if it's trying to get into where you store your trash, if that's in your shed or something, bear steps on that, gets zapped. Highly effective. If you're barefoot, you're gonna get zapped. But if you have rubber-soled shoes, you can step on it, and because rubber's an insulator, right? Your pet steps on it, it's gonna get zapped, right? So it's another tool for different situations. It's often a tool that we use, you know, for some conflicts around homes. If a bear got in through a window, you know, if a bear pushed an air conditioning unit in, right? We can come and set up a mat. Bear set up a camera, bear comes back the next couple days, steps on it, gone. All right, so we've seen those tools be effective in that way. All right, but it requires an electric fence energizer, which is a couple $100. Making the mat is not that hard. You know, it's a couple, you know, $50 of supplies and some time. Yeah.
Is there any commonality with the homes that bears are breaking into? Because I feel like we have a lot of bears, but I don't really cook a lot of meat, and I have compost that is all vegetable, that's never a problem. Like, is there is it people that are cooking a lot of spare ribs or bacon, or you know, what is there? There's got to be a commonality.
It's a lot of times it's opportunity and having some sort of past attraction, getting trash, you know, finding food around that house before or in the neighborhood before, and then opportunity. If a screen was left, if it's just a screen window and it's first floor and I smell the trash inside, it's not that they've been cooking or there's a pie sitting right, you know, cooling on the counter. But think about what they're eating outside that's human related next to the house is the same thing inside. It's the kitchen trash, because that's where the leftovers are getting dumped. So they can smell that it's inside that same kind of thing. And you know, bears are getting, you know, learn how to operate levers, things like that. You know, they're experiential learners. So if they've had experience getting into a car before, they know how to open a car, learn how to open a car door or a lever door. So it's that experiential learning as well, as bears find some good food, find the trash outside, windows, you know, screen, maybe the window's cracked a little bit, or as a bear, you know, will learn to open a window too.
Yeah.
So it's that
It's
experiential.
all gotta come back to bacon.
What's that?
It all comes back to bacon.
Yeah.
Just comment about that. A lot of the foods bears like are not meat-based.
Right.
If you put corn cobs, apple peels, melon rinds, and you have bears in your neighborhood, they're gonna find you compost.
Really, I compost it like I'm
Well,
a
you're
crazy
lucky.
composter.
You're lucky.
It's like weird, I mean, it'll probably happen tomorrow and I'll have much.
Yeah. But yeah, peanut butter, like all the things, you know, going into the pantry, right? They're not usually
There's a lot of-
going into the
lot
freezer.
of vegetation-based foods that bears like.
Yeah.
What about
And
garden?
they're concentrated sometimes.
Tomatoes, cucumbers growing in the garden.
Are
Is that
those,
attractive there?
bears, they're general, they're omnivores, right? They can take advantage of those things, but there's not a lot of calories in a tomato.
Okay.
But if you have other things growing, pumpkins, those are gonna be more, there's more calories in pumpkins. You can, putting an electric fence around a garden is a very reasonable thing to do. You don't have to worry about that, you don't have to worry about turning around, when you're in gardening and there's a bear in with you, so it'll be useful. So, another strategy for coexistence we want people to do is to start scaring bears away. Mention this habituation, desensitizing to people, right? So bears are used to there being no consequence and only rewards for coming around homes. If we can start to shift that around, where we shift the reward and risk this way, where there's no rewards and there's more risk, bears will spend their time where there's better rewards and no risk. So think about your neighbor and all that. If the rewards are still there and there's low risks, you're going to expect to see more bears coming around homes. If you can shift that where there's no rewards and the risk, because now everybody is trying to scare me away, they're honking their horn, they're throwing things at you, if you're the bear, or I get an electric zap, on certain front doorsteps, I get an electric zap now, so it's kind of, now every, 50 houses I get zapped, and I get a food reward every 10, it's not worth it, especially when there's still there's a lot of natural habitat around. But if you had a choice of a salad, and you're gonna spend all day foraging, and you get a salad, a few berries, or the garbage can right there, it's still gonna be worth going to that garbage can during the day at some point to make sure you get that good calorie reward, even if you live in really good habitat.
What about grills?
Do the horns work?
Air horns, if I'm here and you're there, maybe it's gonna be loud for you, right? Getting closer you are, the more alarming that is. But if you're standing inside your house and you open the window and the bear's walking through or the bear's eating your trash, it's not gonna do anything. But it can be effective if it's, if you're out gardening and you have a little boat horn in your pocket and you turn around and there is a bear close by and maybe it's curious or it's doing something. From our range here, a boat horn or air horn will send a bear running. This is very close, this is very loud. Far away, not gonna do it. Same thing with like a whistle or your voice. If you're this close and yelling at a bear, it's gonna move away. It does not wanna be this close, especially if you're confronting. It's gonna wanna create space. So, voices, as we mentioned, aren't as effective. Those kinds of things aren't as effective for scaring bears away from longer distances. So, if you can add something physical to your hazing, that will also increase the risk for a bear. Causing bears some pain, like with electric fencing, is very effective at teaching bears that there's a consequence here.
Will
Right.
they defend themselves?
It's important if you are going to scare bears away that they're not cornered, that they have an escape route, right? But generally, because I can't say never, right? If I blow an air horn at you, you're probably going to run, but maybe you're going to be really mad at me. But I'm pretty sure you're just going to run, right? So, high likelihood, making sure that there's an escape route for the bear. If there's cubs, or if the bear goes up the tree, stop the hazing. At that point, it's up there, it's not going to do anything, right? Physically hazing bears, we often use paintball guns. We use powder instead of the paint, but just able to cause a sting, cause pain to the bear, temporary pain, where it's going to want to get out of there and leave that area where they're experiencing that, right? Similar to getting stung by bees. You're just going to stand there and get stung by bees? You guys, no. A bear might get stung by bees, but paintballs are direct. They're kind of an unknown threat as well, because they're coming from someone who's yelling at you and they're shooting you with a paintball marker, paintball gun. If you have less than lethal rounds, those can be effective, but I'm not telling you to go shoot firearms like that at bears, because it depends on the town and where you live and all that, and what's legal. Just kind of saying examples of physical hazing that we use and that we know a lot of residents like to have used successfully as well.
Do bears have sounds they make to tell you to back off, or other bears too close?
Some behaviors that people often see bears do if they're uncomfortable are things like huffing and jaw popping. Those are pretty common defensive behaviors where they're telling you, I'm uncomfortable about the situation, I'm uncomfortable how close you are. They are not signaling that I'm about to take you down, right? Those are very defensive, I'm uncomfortable behaviors, and kind of the next thing might be a bluff charge. It may be stomping or swatting the ground. It may be kind of moving forward quickly and giving some more vocalizations. Those are all very common sort of defensive, uncomfortable bear behaviors. They're not bears about to attack me behaviors.
Right, it's them telling us to back off, or they're
Yeah,
uncomfortable.
or they're, and
Which
if a
is-
bear, if you're hazing a bear from a safe area and a bear's doing that, continue to do it, right? Make that bear uncomfortable. The next move is for that bear to leave as well.
Yeah.
Acreage, is there, I heard there's something about acreage, depending on how much you have, what you're free to do and not free to do.
In terms of scaring bears away,
Protecting arms, whatever.
if it's something, you're talking about actual firearms outside of your house, that's not for me to, it's out of my scope.
But is there a legality to it regarding?
Different
how much-
towns have different rules about discharging firearms, and even how they classify paintball markers. So, you know, usually
Thank you
when,
for your time.
yeah, it's coming.
And the paintball markers he's talking about, you can buy, you don't have, paintball are gel coated with paint inside, and you have to refrigerate it and all this kind of stuff. You can get metal balls that go in a paintball gun, and they aren't, it's not permanent injury for the bear, because a lot of the fur absorbs a lot of the kinetic energy.
So my recommendation is just to use paintball guns or inert powder balls, which you can get online, or there are paintball retailers. I don't want you to freeze paintballs. They make pepper balls. That's not necessary. The goal is to give bears a sting, right? And so, but not a sting that if you don't want to aim for their faces, you don't want to hit cubs if there's a cub. Your goal is to give them some kind of physical hazing. And paintballs or powder balls, inert powder balls, are more affordable, easy to get. There's many retailers around. That's kind of as far as I would go as a resident. That's what I have. I have a paintball marker. You get from the store.
But it's like a lawsuit or a fist fight. If you're involved in one, you've already lost. So like there are so many things that you can do ideally before you have to. I wouldn't know, like shooting something with a paintball.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm not telling everybody you need to do your part and buy a paintball marker and go hit bear. But some people like to have some other options, and that is one option that people have used well to scare bears away.
So much
but
nicer than
certainly, and you're taking on your liability on your property. If you you shoot your neighbor's car windows with paint,
Or your
they're probably gonna get
child's
right.
eye out.
So I'm telling you, that's one way of physical hazing that we use. Our ENCON officers use beanbag rounds. There are other sort of less than lethal firearm type devices out there that I know people use, and they're all doing kind of the same thing. We're trying to physically haze bears to shift that risk-reward balance, because voices aren't scary enough. But if you combine those things with a good voice, the next couple times the bear's around and you just have your voice, it's going to respect that more because it remembers, okay, I got hit last time.
So people shouldn't go out looking for it.
No, absolutely not. This is, I'm in a safe spot on my property, the bear's in the trash can, I really don't, it got in there, I really want to get it away. Hey bear, yell at it. Maybe you tried throwing things at it. I got the paintball gun, pop, and now it's gone. And now I clean up my garbage. All right, so it's one tool. Kind of talking about a lot of different tools that you can use to kind of manage conflicts in different ways. Physical hazing with something like a paintball marker is one of those tools. That may be appropriate for you. Maybe you're not interested. Totally fine. All right. But the key is, one thing to think about is, we think of black bears as being these wild animals, and they certainly are wild animals. But the behaviors over time has become sort of that less wild, sort of habituated. And we want, when we see a bear, we want to say, oh, look at that beautiful wild bear. We know a lot of bears in Connecticut aren't behaving that way, right? Bears should be afraid of people, right? And you go to states that have 10 times as many bears as we do, you may hardly see a bear because they don't want to be seen out in the open like bears in Connecticut do. So wild bears should be afraid and more respectful, wary of people, and we shouldn't treat them like they're big pets or big raccoons, or okay, just tolerate it, let it be. Tolerance for bears doing this kind of behavior and taking advantage of things is not coexistence.
Makes people scared.
Yeah. bears are living in, among good natural habitat. So bears around here, even if those human-related attractants are not there, they're gonna still come and look around homes and still do that.
Out on the deck, I can leave my grill open and cook out there, because you're saying they have other options, correct?
There are other options, yep. But if there's still an attractant in there, like you haven't cleaned the grease tray out in a long time, and there's still good calorie rewards, it's worthwhile checking that stuff out for a bear.
Right, it's neat though, so they could also start going after rodents or rabbits or pets.
A bear that has had exposure to meat, that's something they're naturally going to have in the environment. Just because a bear has killed a goat, if a bear has depredated on a goat, does not make it more likely to prey on another large animal like a human or a pet, right? Those are other goats, pig. Those are things that resemble instinctive things that are out in the wildland that they're going to encounter that are occasionally opportunistic prey. It's just like deer will especially fawns earlier in the season, are preyed upon opportunistically, right? But it does not mean a bear that's tasted meat is going to be a man-eater next, right? So there's a lot of, if we were to somehow get 100% compliance and everything's locked up, I'm sure we're gonna still have bears that are attempting to get to where they know that there's food inside the houses. We would still have some of those issues, while those same bears are still here who have learned all of that. It will take a long time, generations, for bears to not have that association, right? But we still have a good amount of habitat, so if that were to magically happen, bears around here have great habitat.
Has CEEP looked into the possibility of increasing natural food sources deep in the woods? Like planting things that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's called diversionary feeding, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is you're trying to lure bears, instead of our attractants around the homes luring bears into our backyards, you're trying to lure them back in the woods, right? But that has a lot of problems, especially in a small, compact state like Connecticut. Diversionary feeding it's been used way out west to keep bears from, at certain times of the year, keeping bears from damaging tree plantations, right? But it is so inappropriate in a small, densely populated state to add food where we have good natural foods. They're not, right? So bears aren't starving in the forests and coming into our homes, right? When you see a bear in Hartford, it's not because there is no more food in the woods for that bear. That bear is choosing to live in Hartford because it's got habitat, the components of habitat I talked about before, right? It's got enough food, water, shelter, space, and the arrangement that's tolerable to that bear, and it's going to choose to do that. Even if we moved it to a deep area of the woods with a smorgasbord of human-related foods, those bears are still going to go back to where they are. Connecticut is very small, right? Any deep forest you think we have in Connecticut is still connected to neighboring areas. And attracting bears into those areas, it may certainly will increase the density of bears visiting those areas because there's food rewards, but all the people that live around in those areas experience increased conflicts as well. It also it's not a natural thing, right? And so we're not fixing any problem, we're only adding new problems because there's still gonna be food rewards here that bears are gonna take advantage of, and now you've artificially added additional food in these other areas that is not gonna be natural. So it's highly problematic in Connecticut for diversionary feeding of that type.
How about birth control, like I read a few years ago, PCP?
Yeah, there's nothing that's approved for bears, and even if there was a highly effective way to reduce reproductive output, either from on the male side or the female side, those types of interventions are very expensive, often require revisiting the same individuals, and it's nearly impossible to handle every bear, especially as the population continues to grow. New Jersey did a study to see how feasible this would be as an alternative management strategy. It was totally not feasible at all. It also does nothing to deal with the bears existing on the landscape now that are highly habituated in food condition. Even if it was successful in reducing population growth, right? So you could flatten out population growth, no new individuals in the population. We're still sitting here with this population in this scenario right now. So we've done nothing to do that, but we've spent a ton of money and tried to reach more impossible goals that way.
So you're in favor of the shotgun shell?
The shotgun shell approach.
Finances, the finances of a hunting season for population control and reduction?
Yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about population management here. So let's just get through that. Let's get to that point. All right, I appreciate people sticking through this. Kind of harped on this already. Ways that you can support the bear population: prevent conflicts before they arise. Stop filming them. Start scaring them. Let us know about your bear conflicts, right? So we can try to help you if there's a way, or at least have a better understanding of what people are experiencing. That's part of our mission, is to understand what people are experiencing with the bear population, good and bad. All right. Try to learn more about what we actually do. I appreciate everybody for coming tonight, because I'm trying to share kind of what we actually do, because there's a lot of misinformation put out about what we do as bear managers in the state. I got to say, leave cubs alone. Especially earlier in the summer, we get to that point where people start to see a bear cub by itself, might be calling, might be left up, seems like it's left up in a tree, and well-meaning people immediately think that that cub is an orphan and needs to be saved. We know many times that female bears leave cubs alone for many, many hours, even days. All right, they may come back when you're not noticing and nurse the cub, leave the cub up there for safety. All right, so well-meaning people can make poor decisions and draws more attention to that cub that's there, because they want to take pictures, they want to wait to see if the mother comes back. But that presence makes the mother less likely to come back. All right, so as we get later into the summer, cubs are much more independent than earlier in the year. All right, so even if their cub was orphaned, the mother got hit by a vehicle, all right, we know cubs can survive at this point in the year. It's less likely than if their mother was alive, but we have many examples, and just in our own data, which is a relatively small proportion of the population, that cubs that were orphaned at this point in the summer, even earlier, survived, and we rehandle them many, many years later as breeding adults.
No child wants to be an orphan. No child wants to be an orphan.
Yep. So, please leave, if you notice that a cub, maybe there's a cub sitting there for a long time, let us know, right? We'll kind of give you some advice, try to help us monitor the situation. Many times, again, well-meaning people create worse situations by getting more attention to an issue, and it creates a situation where bears get orphaned because people intervene when they shouldn't. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about population management. All right, there are different ways to manage populations. The tool that most people want to talk about and is the most effective way to manage a bear population is through regulated hunting. Hunting is one tool. We've talked about a lot of the other tools that we have to try to manage conflicts. None of those tools do anything to change the population growth of the bears that are in the state. None of them do anything to regulate bear density in certain areas of the state that may be experiencing more conflicts or not. Hunting is also a way to utilize a renewable natural resource that our wildlife is. Right? Bears are a highly desired food source. They're very good. They provide other resources, as well. So, but one thing that often gets talked about in this hunting or not hunting argument that people have, and it's probably within, if I were to poll, I'm not going to do it, if I were to poll everybody in this room, there would be very split and very strong feelings one way or the other. And so I want to just share information about what hunting, in this case, how population management is an effective tool for managing black bears. One of the ways, in particular in Connecticut, is managing, if we can manage the population in certain areas, in certain parts of the state where we have high conflicts, we are more likely to harvest conflict bears, bears that have been involved in more conflicts. When New Jersey had a hunting season, didn't have a hunting season, had a hunting season, they do a lot of bear research as well. They found that bears that were involved in past conflicts, where they were handled at conflict sites, those bears were more likely to be harvested in the following season. So we're learning from other states as well that bears that are more bold, more involved in more conflicts, since they're less afraid of people, are more likely or more vulnerable to being harvested. Bears that are more afraid of people, more naturally wild, sort of wary, are less likely to be harvested because when they smell people, a hunter in a tree stand, they're less likely to be want to go near there. All right. So it's not magic. Okay, we're going to bring someone in and they're going to get this bear off my property. Hunting in terms of population management is highly regulated during certain times of the year, so generally in the fall, when bears are moving a lot, moving out of state a lot more, they're going on these long distance movements many times to areas where there's other food sources around. So it means that bears that are in like West Hartford, Farmington, some of these more developed areas where people go, well, how can you hunt bears in those areas? Because bears move a lot, especially in that fall period when they could be more vulnerable to a harvest. Connecticut is unique in that we are the only state with an established bear population that does not use hunting as a tool for population management. All right, and yet all these other states, as you can see, have much larger bear populations. Their populations are continuing to expand. The states that have stable bear populations, those are being stabilized as part of a management goal, so they're increasing harvest to stabilize the population there. So a lot of people think if we have hunting, that means we're trying to get rid of the bears. And that's not true. Remember, our mission is to allow population to expand into unoccupied areas. We want to be able to manage the population growth, manage the population in certain parts of the state where people are dealing with a lot of conflicts, where we can start to get the population over generations, again, as another tool to start to change that behavior as well, where the bolder bears or conflict-prone bears have a higher likelihood of being harvested, where over time, those bears are removed from the population as the population gets turned over time. In that period of time, there's a selective advantage for being more afraid of people, behaving more like bears in other states. So over time, this is what the expected outcome is, where the population's behavior, not individual bears, oh, I hear a gunshot, I'm going to be less conflict prone. It's over time the population changes. All right, and generally most states are harvesting between 5 and 25% of their bear populations each year. And that's still allowing those populations to expand or at least stabilize. All right, so I'm sure there's going to be more questions about bear hunting. Why don't we do it? We, as biologists, we see that there's an issue that we don't have that tool for bear hunting, and the state has a tool for population management. We would like to have that ability to do that. It's up to the legislature to allow that to sort of happen. So they may produce bills. I'm not a politician. Bills get introduced and there's comments, and some bills it's written well, some I wouldn't like how it's written. All right, I am an advocate for the tool, being able to have that tool to manage the population, to allow it to behave more like the other wild bear populations, allowing it to expand into the unoccupied habitats that we have throughout Connecticut, and allow bears to behave, again, more naturally. We don't want people to start to view bears so negatively. And that's starting. Many people are sick of bears. They view them now as pests. They used to like seeing them 20 years ago. They're, wow, these wonderful creatures. And now they view them as pests. And part of that is because they feel helpless in being able to manage those issues. And they don't feel like they're being supported by the state, which I agree with. We have been unable to manage the population because we are not allowed to use that tool for management. Yeah, Annie, we'll start with some questions.
Yeah, I'd just like to, I want to applaud one thing you said earlier. You seem to be conflating the issue now, but population and conflicts don't relate to each other necessarily. Like you mentioned earlier yourself, that states with higher concentrations of bears, higher populations, could have less conflicts. So I would just want to point, every couple of years they have a Human Bear Conflict International Conference. DEEP did send 4 people there, so kudos to you for that. But in all the 5 days of Bear Talk, there is no place in the world that they use hunting as a means to reduce human-bear conflict. And that's what the people in Connecticut want to deal with. It's not about managing a population to a level where people can shoot the bears. we wanna reduce conflict. We offer year after year, I work for Humane World for Animals, a plan, a grant program that would subsidize trash containers for people, that would help businesses with the big dumpsters. That's enforcement of bird feeders, which is not being done with any vigor. That will reduce the conflicts, but to suggest that if you hunt and manage a population, maybe a bear that, I haven't seen that study where a bear that is involved in conflicts are hunted more, maybe because they're more susceptible to baiting by humans. And then they bait the bear, which is a whole other level of.
Yeah, they don't bait
like,
there.
yeah.
But, so, thank you for your comment. I know we've disagreed on this part, on these things. At that conference though, I'll point out, in all of those, nearly all of those jurisdictions, bear hunting takes place as a tool for population management. And in no state are they thinking about removing hunting because they don't think it does anything on conflicts, right? If you talk to the bear managers in all those other states, the idea of removing a harvest or reducing harvest scares them because they know in areas where they have high conflict, they try to manage for higher harvest because it is a tool. It's not, again, as I mentioned, it's not the tool. It's not the only tool for managing conflict. We've never said we're trying to just do that, right? But we understand that relying only on compliance will never work in this state, and it hasn't worked for 30 plus years, right? We are still, if that worked, and we think over time, wow, people are going to get with the program, you would expect that people in this part of the state wouldn't have so many bear conflicts. But compliance will never reach that one. And I mentioned COVID vaccine as an analogy because we will not get to that level of compliance. We couldn't do it for free when it was stick your arm out the window one time and it was going to save people's lives. These bear conflicts are not killing people, so it's not going to ever stir them to that sort of figure to be that compliant. So relying on that and relying on a strategy to do that will still help. And I would like Humane World Friends to kind of work those avenues. People think that the bear biologists control your trash can, should have some power over your trash can. That's a municipal, it deal with the municipalities, private trash haulers, and customers, right? Those products to reduce those issues in your yard are already available. They don't need me to get in the way, right? So those things are there, and I hope you guys can find ways to encourage towns to do that. You don't need us to do that. You don't need us, to get involved in that. You can go ahead. People can do that. All the other, organizations like that can go ahead and do that and get people to do that. The more you involve us, probably, right? It's just going to add. You don't want to add more bureaucracy to it. You can go ahead, get towns to do that. That would be great.
Question,
Yeah.
practical. When they attack the chickens, will they eat them? I mean, are they carnivores or not?
They're
If they eat a chicken,
omnivores.
would they eat a dog?
They're omnivores, right? So they're opportunistic. So they do eat chicken, they'll eat the chicken, right? But as I mentioned before to the one behind you, just because the bear's eaten chicken, killed a chicken or killed a goat, doesn't mean it's going to then prey on a dog next. Most of our bear-dog encounters where a dog may be killed is usually because it's viewed as a threat, right? So because dogs are very often the aggressors in those situations where bears perceive that there's a threat, they either can't escape, feel like they can't escape, or they have cubs and they feel like they can't get the cubs to safety and they protect themselves. So just because a bear has gone after and eaten chicken doesn't mean, or killed a goat, doesn't mean that it's going to then attack your pet next. Yes?
I just wanna say, I ran a campground in 203 sites in Buckhanson for 12 years. We did have DEP come to talk to us about what to do, because bears were just walking around the campground, they were taking garbage, they were doing this, they were doing that, food. So they suggested one, we take the dumpster, and at that time, I don't know if they had a lockable dumpster, to be very honest, but they told us to put bleach on it. After a while, that worked. We told the people, you can't have a bird feeder if you're gonna camp here, and they did. That started to work. Then we told them the little tiny refrigerators that the bears are able to open, because they're smart, please put them in. And little by little, and I'm gonna tell you, I still talk to people here. Little by little, it got better and better and better. But they all had to do it. And they would come down and they would tell me, so-and-so's not doing it. Like my neighbor throws corn cobs out and he throws watermelon stop that, you know, and I mean, that's what's happening here. People are doing these things, and you could try all you want, but if you can't get Jane and Jim and all those people, but at the campground, what he's saying as far as use this and use this and use that, eventually, it works. It does, it works.
Yeah, I have a question about that very thing. If you know or have heard that your neighbor is doing those kind of things, which people in town are, I think, I can't really get the answer to your question, but you should report it. Correct?
If you know people are feeding bears, you know, have their bird feeders out and bears are getting there, and yeah, you can report that to us. If you're in a town with a municipal ordinance, you could first try going to your local, municipal police, and, because those things can be enforced locally if there's a municipal ordinance. That's, another good tool. It also can, again, those municipal ordinances can have more teeth than what is currently written for the state law.
Yeah, so I would like to see, I would like to start a campaign for a few things. The bear-proof cans, I think they should be mandatory. I think the USA Waste, its price is gonna go up, I guess. I drive to the dump, I know a lot of people do. But if you're not driving to the dump, you have to have a bear-proof can.
Bird seed should be illegal, it just should not be allowed, it should be illegal.
Yeah, whatever, it should be mandatory. I think dumpsters is a pain in the neck to have them all locked up. I think it should be mandatory. In other towns around here, the bird feeders should not be allowed, all summer, spring, fall. And for the people,
Or
the
winter.
bird lovers, bird feeders, and you can tell me if this is true, bird feeders are actually bad for birds. It is teaching them bad habits, that it harbors bacteria, it's, feeding them the wrong things.
You
So
can
actually,
see plenty of birds without a feeder just by
you know what,
walking
you got a
around.
chance to ask questions, it's my turn.
I'm sorry.
50 people, thank you. I think that the thing is we are endangering the bears. If we're doing these things, you said we care about the bears, I don't care if it comes through my window, it didn't really do anything. We're endangering the bears because it will lead to the point that we're gonna have to have hunting season. So you need to, teach these cubs, we don't need videos of the cubs on your swing set or your porch. We've all seen them, everybody needs to immediately scare these cubs, because they're the ones who are learning the bad behaviors.
Yeah.
I loved her idea of if there's a site where you can report bear sighting, conflict, or positive interaction. It'd be great if you could also report neighbors that might be feeding bears, etc. That'd be fantastic. I actually just wanted to say thank you.
Through citing reports, you can,
Oh, that's awesome, that's great.
in the comments section.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. This has been so informative and so interesting, and I really appreciate that you're so incredibly diplomatic and good at presenting facts. It's been really, really interesting. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that it would be wonderful if there was one more, like the Smokey the Bear campaign, which would have been when I was a kid. I feel like with social media today, if there were a way to educate people about how to coexist peacefully with bears, I feel like that would go a really long way. I mean, I kind of follow this, and I feel like things have changed so quickly. Like the last time I came to a talk like this, I think it was acceptable to put bird feeders out in the winter, but it seems like things have changed so quickly in the last few years. The landscape is different, and the stakes seem a bit higher, and that if more people were aware of, and I happen to have spent time in Alaska around grizzlies, so I feel like I know quite a lot about bears, but not everybody does, and I feel like just a little bit could go a really long way with teaching people about bird feeders. You can't do this, you can't do that.
It's difficult in
A social media campaign,
right,
I'm a filmmaker. I feel like that would be
because of the
fantastic.
algorithm. So our agency has spent several $100,000 every year on private marketing campaigns. You're going outside, getting marketing team to try to do that more. We do interviews with news many times a year. So we feel like we're doing a lot to get the message out there. And if people have an issue, we think they would Google Connecticut Black Bear and find all of our website information, right? But with social media and the algorithms, it's tough because you get pushed
takes a lot of work, yeah.
the news article about, or the news video about the bears on the swing set, and not the news thing of where they interviewed the bear biologist and talked all about the things that we shouldn't do, right? So it's tough with that, but we're trying, we continue to try to do more marketing to try to get that educational
Yeah.
campaigns for that. We have a very dedicated team of volunteers that give this bear program all around the state. They go to hundreds of towns, deliver hundreds of presentations, the same presentations that we approved. So there's been, there is a talk in almost every town, over the next couple of years, or last few years, where people who are trying to get this information, they don't have their ears on, right? They're not looking for that information. It's hard to get good information to the
Yeah,
public
for sure.
unless they're gonna
Yeah.
open their eyes and look
And I
for
don't
it.
think it should just be up to you, I'm just saying that I feel like, if there were a way to do something that was more active, that plugged into communities,
Yep.
at a grassroots level, every single
Yeah,
person
there
here
are-
probably is
there are,
connected to like Barkhamsted Town Chatter,
Yep.
or, all of the Facebook groups that
Yeah.
town.
Yeah, and that's, one reason why we try to post regularly about, on our Facebook page, post that then Town Chatter, groups can reshare that information, so it crosses more eyeballs as well. There are, for communities, if there's any HOAs and communities like that, there's information that if you go on the Bearwise website, which you can get through from our website, about being, compliant Bearwise community. So people, will get together and sort of agree on, a set of principles that, Bearwise has kind of set up to be a Bearwise community. And so, it gives people, whether it be a town, whether it be a shopping plaza that wants to be a Bearwise shopping plaza, there's additional ways that if you have neighbors that are like, we want to do this, we want to live by this set of sort of
Yeah.
Bearwise standards, you can go ahead and do that.
Because I feel like if you live in Alaska, you know very well what to do with the grizzlies. Like if you live in Montana, you probably have a better sense of how to live peacefully alongside
Yeah.
bears. But I feel like people don't know as much about how to live alongside black bears in Connecticut.
Mhm. There's a lot more people here, and because the threat of a black bear is different than a brown bear, so that's also kind
The
of.
fear is not dissimilar, but I mean, it's obviously very different.
Yeah.
People are so fearful of black bears where every time I run into one has been a really peaceful encounter.
We're experiential learners like they are, so
Yeah.
if you've had a few bad experiences, bears getting into your homes, those experiences have changed versus, every time I see a bear, it's running off, and I got to see the cubs loping after it, like the positive
We're
experiences.
desensitized now.
Yeah,
We moved here 12 years ago from the shoreline, and we were blown away. We saw a bear, we were freaking out, oh my God, who do we call?
Yeah.
Report it. Now it's like, oh, another bear.
yep.
Can you
Yeah.
clarify bird feeders in the winter quickly? Yes,
Yeah.
no?
I don't support, we don't encourage bird feeders any time of year, okay? Any time of year a bear can get. So you're never gonna hear the bear biologist encourage people to feed birds any time of the year. Is it easier, or is it less likely to cause conflicts in the winter? Yes, because most bears are denning. If you do so in the coldest weeks of the year when there's a lot of snow cover, it's very unlikely for birds to be out, or for bears to be out. But you're never gonna hear a bear biologist or someone say, you know what, but go ahead, it's fine, because the chance is still up there. We know bears will be active anytime. Talk to someone who works at Wild Birds Unlimited, they're gonna tell you, oh, go ahead. So, or, even Audubon isn't supporting bird feeders, especially outside.
So, with my experience,
Yeah.
because I think everybody, they come from different perspectives. I don't leave garbage out. I have no bird feeders in my yard, but I lived in one of those neighborhoods of the dirt roads that were on Highland Lake. So the bears are very dense in there, and Deep has been at my house, they've been at my daughter's house, that you put the electric pads at my daughter's house, because she's gotten broken into twice, and I've gotten broken into once. I've had them come through and rip down my dog fencing, which is cattle fencing around my yard, and actually breaking that down to get in to the back deck, and I have 2 dogs, and they don't care about the dogs, and they're actually literally pursuing, and so don't just think, for those that are saying, oh, it's all the people that are leaving their garbage out. It's not. You can be doing all the right stuff, and there are some bears out there that have in their mind that they're gonna come through your house no matter what cost. And so there needs to be protection for that. Not everybody deserves it, quote unquote, because they left the bird feeder out or the trash out.
Exactly.
And so that type of mentality, I mean, I was out in my garden, the bears had come and they broke down my grapevines, you know, and it takes 3 years to develop first year of, you know, grapes. Well, the baby bear comes out there behind me when I'm working in another part of the garden. Mama sees baby bear next to me, decides she's gonna charge me. I go running into the dog fence area, and I have the photos, I showed you one of them, where the mama bear is charging me. My dogs come up to the fence, mama bear stops to lick the fence, touch it with her tongue to see if it's electric or not. You know, and if I was a little bit slower, she probably would have got me. You know, so these are the types of things, just being in your own yard, and I've lived there since 2002, and I have never seen the aggression of bears the way that I have the last 2 years.
Do you think people are having, do you think other people in your neighborhood though have garbage out?
Well, aren't you in my neighborhood?
I don't know.
I'm over on St. Catherine.
Okay. I
Yeah,
didn't
you're
realize
right
it was
behind
you.
me.
Okay.
You're right behind me. But you have garbage cans, we all go to the dump,
I go
so
to the
we,
dump.
yeah, so we keep ours, you know, locked up in the basement until we go to the dump.
We
There's
don't
no
put
garbage
trash out.
Yeah, we never
Till
put
the
trash out.
morning they're picking it up. I don't take it out of the kitchen,
You know, so,
put it out, and any
Yep.
scraps, I put them, I triple bag them and put them in my freezer.
Yeah,
And I don't put them out until 6:30 in the morning on Monday morning when they're coming at 7.
Yep.
You gotta learn,
Yeah.
we
no,
don't
just
have a
that.
locked trash can.
Yeah.
But we do have a small one, we don't generate a lot of trash,
Yep.
mostly recycling.
Right.
We put it out half hour before the trash.
Which
truck
is one of the, in terms of towns mandating bear carts, right? One of those issues, because there are a lot of people who say, well, I don't wanna pay for this extra cost because I manage my food scraps in a way that I never had these issues. So I shouldn't have to do that. So that's where, again, outside of what any bear manager has any involvement in, that's where it comes to residents, trash haulers, municipalities, coming to an agreement on these things, on how they're gonna work it. And I think a lot of times they end up choosing to stand still and point fingers. A lot of times those fingers come back at deep to do something, when municipal trash hauling is not my job, right? The products are available. I'm glad USA and All Waste and Rocco, and CNPW are all offering bear-resistant carts now and bear-resistant dumpsters, so the tools are there. So the excuse now of, oh, these aren't available is gone. They're available. They're highly effective. We want people to use them.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for sitting.
I
Yeah.
got a different note. You all are the job, right? A lot of time near rivers and
Yep.
trails. And sometimes there's nobody else around. So is there anything to do to, sometimes we just talk really loud or clap our hands every once in a while? I mean,
Yeah, you know, the more bear knows you're gonna be there, the less surprise it's gonna be.
yeah,
The less likely you might have a surprise bear if it gets you close to that.
yes,
It feels like it needs to,
yes.
make contact. It's very, very unlikely for a bear for a black bear to be startled by you though and want to make contact. Most of our human bear contacts are involved dog, right? So if you're out there walking your dog, and the dog's off leash, and you're on the dog, right?
So like if we did, well, we're always, we talk loud, whistle loud.
Most of the time that bear smells you guys there, right? A lot of that fear of surprising bears on ice and stuff, a lot of that is like good advice down there, out west, thickets you can't see. Unlike the bears around here, again, are so used to people, it's very likely for you to startle a bear, its reaction to be trying to make contact.
But if there is a bear, should I like pick the dog up and hold the dog's nose so it doesn't bark?
Dog's probably gonna bark, but if having that dog under control and you're this small, you can pick it up, you're thinking about that bear. Because if you're in that situation, the bears, probably not even looking at you, it's seeing if that dog is ready for your cubs, is that dog, and if you can pick it up and yell at it. Most all, I'm not gonna say all, right, because I can't individually. But it's not gonna run, but if that dog is at the end of your leash, it's barking, and that bear still may feel like that dog could come after her. And may feel like.
We were up on, Black Hill the other day. And nobody was around, we stayed a while, we walked, we clapped, we did this, and a young girl came in, and I said, we just go around, we drive around. And she was there farther in the woods with a good-sized dog, and we said to her, are you scared? She goes, I see him all the time.
Yeah, when you're out there, there's bears around, right? You just don't see them. So they know you're there. You just want to
I see them all the time with my dog, but it's never. Thank you so much, that was really amazing, really, really great, you're a great presenter, it was really, really good, thank you.
And if you're walking